So as people filter out, the board would like to say welcome to all the families and all the recipients tonight. We are equally proud of you and what you have shown to your classmates and to your schools. And so as Dr. Landon honors each and every one of you for being extraordinary at going to school and learning and being a great citizen, I'm going to take the moment on behalf of the board to say this is very well deserved, and we are all so proud of you.
The Superintendent's Citizenship Award was established during the 76-77 school year and is presented annually to students in grades 5, 8, and 12 from each of our schools. Each student is chosen for his or her qualities of responsibility, concern for others, and dedicated efforts on behalf of their respective schools. So I'm most pleased to present these awards. We'll begin with Carolyn Ward, grade 5, Hindley Elementary School. Next, we have Holmes Elementary School, and we have John Lubely.
Dr. Landon, I think I just speak.
Oh, I'm
yeah.
sorry. Oh. I told you it's my first time. So.
Mine too, clearly. So you have to come up here. Carolyn is joined today by her lovely family, Lita and Tim Ward, and Charlotte in middle school, and Margaret in second grade. Charlotte won this award several years ago, so it runs in the family. Carolyn Ward is known throughout the Hindley School community as an exceptional citizen. She's positive, always helpful, and considerate. At Hindley, she serves on the safety patrol and as a spiriteer. Much more than that, she exemplifies the kids' code by not only being respectful to all, truly supportive in other situations. It's not unusual to see Carolyn in the classroom, the playground, the lunchroom, encouraging her classmates as well as younger students and cheering them on. To quote her speech to the faculty, where there was not a dry eye in the house, Caroline said, "In life, we have choices about many things. One big choice that we make is how we are going to approach our life. Are we going to be the best person we can be? Are we going to be kind, thoughtful, and respectful to others? There is no question about what kind of person I want to be. I enjoy doing things for others." And she truly does. Outside of school, Caroline plays the piano, lacrosse, and swims at the YMCA Piranha Swim Team, where she was recognized last year as Swimmer of the Year for her sportsmanship. She helped out at St. Luke's, passing the offerings plate during services. She participates in an annual fundraising event for cystic fibrosis with her family. In addition to all of this, Caroline is an excellent student and an avid reader and writer who hopes one day to be a teacher.
I'm going to try to do it right this time. From homeschool, John Lubely. And John, if you would come up. Good.
As educators, we strive to foster citizenship in each of our students. Watching young people grow more respectful, responsible, courteous, and unselfish is among the most satisfying aspects of our profession. Homeschool is well represented by countless individuals who fit this profile, and especially this year's nominee, Jack Lubely. In his essay connected to his nomination, Jack cited none of his own accomplishments. This was not for lack of effort or understanding, but instead reflects how Jack sees the world. Jack wrote about other people. He cited examples of the kindness shown to him by his peers. To quote, "I was surprised that I was chosen for this award because I have received so many kind acts myself, and I'm grateful to be in a school of so many considerate people." Jack's sense of gratitude is rare among young people. In addition to deep appreciation of others, citizenship requires external visible choices as well as an introspective mindset. As Jack wrote, "We need to help people to take big and small acts of kindness and not just follow rules." Jack does follow the rules, and he's viewed as a leader by staff and students alike. In addition to this award, Jack was also voted by his peers to serve on our student council. He is consistently respectful of classmates and teachers and has been throughout his years at Holmes School. Jack is an outspoken advocate for social justice and is well-versed in civil rights movements across American history. In class debates, he's adept at seeing multiple perspectives while arguing passionately in favor of his positions. This ability is evident with peer interactions as well. He is a gift for helping others better understand multiple viewpoints. Classmates listen when Jack speaks, and many's the time he's negotiated a compromise among arguing classmates with the skill of a seasoned diplomat. Jack draws others in, makes them feel included, makes them feel valued, and students walk away from those interactions feeling better about themselves and the situation. We're grateful for all that Jack brings to Holmes School and are honored that he represents our school this year for the Superintendent's Citizenship Award. Congratulations, Jack.
From Royal Elementary School, Madeline Smalden and Dean Ketchum.
Madeline, known as Maddie. She did ask me to call her Madeline, so I'll adjust the speech. Madeline Smalden, a student in Mr. Satter's 5th grade class, exemplifies the class motto, "Do the right thing at the right time." She's one of those students who understands the importance of learning as much as she can each year and always giving her best in the classroom. According to Mr. Satter, Maddie needs very little direction. Once she takes in the lesson, she works independently, always turning in her best work. If one page is required, she turns in 2. Maddie's one of those students who can be counted on to work with any student in the classroom to help and to help the adults in the room as well. Ms. Vergara, a special education teacher who spends a significant amount of time in the classroom, has known Maddie for a number of years and adds, "Maddie has grown into a confident young woman who's ready to take on the challenges of middle school, and we're sure she'll be very successful." Maddie's classmates recognize these abilities in her too, selecting her to represent the class to receive this award. Maddie appeared at the faculty meeting and persuasively argued why she should receive the award, and the faculty by a large margin agreed. It's easy to see why. The daughter of Evie and Neil Smalden, Maddie has been at Royal since kindergarten. At school, she's been a student council representative in 3rd and 4th grade. She loves music, has been in chorus, and selected for honors in all-state chorus. Outside of school, she is an altar server at church. She's helped run the Yale Hospital Toy Drive and works with Meals on Wheels. Dr. Landon, it's my pleasure to present to you the Royal School Superintendent's Award recipient, Maddie Smalden.
From Tokenique Elementary School, Superintendent's Citizenship Award goes to Catherine Young, Principal Mary Michelson.
Good evening. Tokenique School is so proud to introduce our Superintendent Citizenship Award recipient, Miss Kate Young. She is the best example of someone who is happy, responsible, respectful, and kind. Kate is the oldest in her family. Besides her wonderful mother, Liz, and dad, Chris, she has two brothers, Grant and Scott, and also tonight with her teachers here too, Miss Romanello. So could you all stand up too to get a little... Upon meeting Kate, you will immediately notice her smile on her face and the sparkle in her eyes. Kate has had the wonderful opportunity to attend 4 different schools in 7 years. She has lived in California, Texas, and Darien. She has learned so much from each town and as well as how to meet many new friends. Kate enjoys and looks for opportunities to help others. When she was in kindergarten, her school hosted an assembly featuring a group of talented orphans from Rwanda. Upon arriving home, she decided to decorate a shoebox to help collect money for the children. She spent hours and hours decorating the shoebox with many pretty W's all over the shoebox. When she completed it, she showed it to her mom, and her mom said, "What are all the W's for?" Kate looked at her mom and said, "For Rwanda." Over the past couple years, Kate has raised money for the Sudanese refugees and hosted holiday parties for children in low-income housing who never had a holiday party. At Tokenique, Kate has been involved with clothing drives, toys drive, assembled care packages for foster children, sent a kindness poster to Africa, and enjoyed being pen pals with retired seniors right here in town. Kate told me that moving to so many places, which is not easy, has given her a greater capacity for compassion and empathy. Each day, her father reminds her to be a good person. This thought guides her each and every day to help her think of others and to share kindness in her community, country, and around the world. Please join me in congratulating Kate.
And for our next 5th grader from Oxridge, Carolyn Hendrickson, and her principal, Luke Forshaw.
So my pleasure to introduce Carolyn Hendrickson and to both introduce her parents, Marty and John, who are here as well, for all their terrific work with Carolyn over the years. You've heard my colleagues talk about the Superintendent Citizenship Award and the characteristics of what these students are about this evening. And this was a really, although she didn't feel an easy decision for our school community, because Carolyn's what she called a natural. Knowing her from kindergarten and seeing the young woman she's developed into by 5th grade, she's exuded a kernel of kindness and an empathy that is very challenging to teach. And so Carolyn has served as a model just through the way that she has interacted and guided her work with others of serving as the student that we want others to learn from and with. Carolyn is the type of learner who is, whether it's brokering some typical friend drama that we might have from time to time in school, or assisting a colleague or a friend in math learning, she's the person who's thinking of the other perspective. And in inhabiting that perspective, tries her hardest to make them feel accepted, welcomed, and supported. Caroline also is a fierce intellectual, and it hides underneath the shell of kindness and empathy, but right underneath the surface is a capacity in her to solve problems, work with others, and to provide service to the school community and our community at large, which she does in broad strokes. Carolyn, I just know that you're going to do wonderful things at the middle school and beyond, and I look forward to watching that kernel of kindness develop over the years. It's also really nice because Carolyn is a neighbor, her family's a neighbor to the Oxford School, so I know I'll be seeing you all the time. So please join me in congratulating Carolyn and her family on your
And from Middlesex Middle School, Charlotte Moody, and her principal, Shelley Sullivan.
At Middlesex, the student body nominates someone to receive this award, and it's voted on by the students and staff alike, and Charlotte rose to the top without question. One of our school norms is be kind, and she embodies this norm every day of her life. Without causing attention or wanting recognition, she reaches out to all around her to make their day, their life better, to encourage them in every endeavor. Aside from that, she's incredibly engaged in her own learning and is very active in our school community. Charlotte lights up a room when she enters, as you can tell by her smile. She is beloved by one and all. She stays away from all that middle school drama because she really rises above it. She exhibits empathy and compassion to others and is wise beyond her years. I'm really proud of what you have done at Middlesex. She has also been selected by her teachers to speak at our promotion ceremony, so I look forward to hearing what you have to say at that time. Congratulations. I know that the high school is lucky to get you and that we will see you up here again, so congratulations.
I had the pleasure several weeks ago to give awards, separate from the Superintendent Citizenship Award, at the high school honors awards assembly. And I am very pleased to give the Superintendent's Citizenship Award to both of these young men, and we begin with E. Sachi Smalls.
Sachi is a young woman who has found her voice, and her positive message draws people to her. She is a leader in the school community, and she is well regarded by faculty and peers alike. Well known as the student who will get the study group together, Sachi creates a sense of family with her classmates and is invested in the success of others. It should not surprise us that Isachi has set the goal of becoming a nurse practitioner because her generosity of spirit defines her. Isachi has had the opportunity to travel to Argentina and China, and these experiences have expanded her worldview and contributed to her maturity. Grateful for these experiences and her time in the ABC program at DHS, Isachi is emerging Darien High School as a force to be reckoned with, and she will undoubtedly use her tremendous inner strength, keen intellect, and strong convictions to change the world. We are so fortunate that she has already made her mark on Darien High School. She is guaranteed to make Boston College a better place.
Our next recipient is Aram Russell.
Aram Russell is a young man with a curiosity for how things work and a thirsty intellect. Never afraid of a challenge, Aram has chosen one of the most demanding course loads at DHS and has excelled in every endeavor. In our classrooms, Aram has inspired both faculty and peers alike, and his contributions have raised the level of discourse for all. Aram is an experimenter. He makes time to tinker and explore with electrical inventions and independent projects such as a motorized suit made of cardboard, a crystal radio, and a refurbished 3D printer, to name a few. As the voice of Darien High School on our morning announcements, Aram's warmth, wonderful personality, and sincerity come through to our entire community. As salutatorian of our senior class, Aram is clearly an outstanding student, but even more impressive is the fact that he is an outstanding person and role model for others. He loves his school, and his compassion and kindness are seen in every interaction. Aram is a generous and wonderful human being who is a friend to all and whose humility, integrity, and gratitude are truly extraordinary. Aram is looking forward to continuing his studies at Yale University in the fall, and they are most fortunate to count him among the class of 2023. He will be sorely missed at DHS.
So thank you and congratulations to all. We're so happy that the families could join us tonight. It is one of our best nights. You're welcome to stay. It's very exciting. You're welcome to go. Up to you. But congratulations, and we are so proud of all the students who earned this evening.
Nobody wants to stay.
Does anyone have a camera?
A picture. Next. We're going to give them a minute to clear, but we're going to keep it rolling because it's long tonight.
There's a ramp here.
She's so cool. Right? Isn't that fun?
We don't want to celebrate that.
She's food out there. Yeah, let's give us refreshments. We should have guessed that. All right, we're going to give it another minute, guys. Okay, so we are going to keep going because it's a long agenda this evening. Give everyone another minute. Oh, you're before me. So the next Board of Education, okay, ready? Can I have this? The next Board of Education meeting will be held on June 25th at 7:30 p.m. in the Board of Education meeting room. As we said, this is a great night. First for our Superintendent's Award and our teachers. We're so close, sorry. So you can all hear me.
Almost there.
But also because we have students of all ages. Our senior interns are here to give us an update on the program, so we look forward to that. A big thank you to the town of Darien and especially the Oxbridge Building Committee. They were able to secure municipal funding for the building of Oxbridge School last night with a full RTM vote. So that is very exciting. Mr. Deneen can update us during committee reports, but a big thank you to you and Kip and the committee for all your hard work, and to the RTM for their vote in favor. I believe it passed 92-1. So that is a resounding vote for us and for all the hard work that we've put in and the building committee has. It is with a sad note that we later tonight will accept the resignation of Michael Feeney, and we will have time to say goodbye to him and torture him in his last few weeks. But we do wish him well. With that, it deserves to be said that he is a man of utmost integrity and honest stewardship of our finances. And so we wish you well in your next endeavors, and they are incredibly lucky. So it is with reluctance that I think we'll accept your resignation, but stay to the end and you'll see what happens. It is important to note that the First Selectman did reach out requesting the possibility of a work group for shared services for the town's finance operations. At this time, I believe the administration does not recommend, and the superintendent can speak to that in his report. I also have not heard from the board that is something at this moment we are pursuing. In fact, we have already gone out to look for a replacement for this position because it is so vital. But we do welcome with the town, and I'm happy to have further conversations if there is a need to relook at the Shared Services Committee, which operated several years ago. Michael Harmon served on it, Heather Shea, and myself in the past. And so if there are shared services to capture between town and school, that committee can look at it. But I have not heard from the board at this time that the Director of Finance is that position, and I believe the superintendent will let us know his recommendation shortly. And with that, I will open it up to public comment. Any public comment this evening? Seeing none, we'll move on to the superintendent's report.
Well, I would like to report on that request to combine services. And I think it's no secret that I am opposed to joining the business departments of the town and the school. It's not something that I've come to recently. I have felt that way throughout my career, based on my conversations with some very small districts where that has occurred. If the board isn't able to manage its own finances, which includes budgeting, expenditures, maintenance, custodial services, purchase of books, supplies, materials, field trips, you name it, then they're at the mercy of the town. And that's not to say that the town has any ill will towards the schools. It's just that when pressure comes for expenditures, the town, in all of the experiences I have heard about, puts their own demands first. And so if once a board gets its appropriation, the board is in full control of its appropriation and spend it in the best way it can on behalf of kids to make the education of kids and the life of kids in school better. But I've known of situations where there are questions over expenditures. The town needs to replace, let's say, all of its windows in town hall. And the schools have had a similar kind of a project. There's limited funds. The town gets to go first. And I think that's sort of natural. I mean, if we had control over the town's expenditures, I'm sure we would expend on the kids first. So I am opposed to it on the grounds that I think the Board of Education and its children in the district will be short-served by combining those services. I think our financial department is so complex as compared to the towns. Not only do we have over 60% of the budget, but we also have a huge number of employees. We have health expenditures and unemployment expenditures that are different than the towns, because the town generally has fewer employees, has higher expenditures. None of it works to the advantage of the kids as I see it. So you asked for my opinion. My opinion is keep it separate. It's the way it was intended to be by law. Board of Education members are agents of the state, not agents of the town. And I think it's in the best interest of the entire town, but especially the kids, not to combine the services.
We will move on to the approval of minutes. It is requested that the board approve the following: minutes of the special meeting and executive session held May 14th, 2019. May I have a motion to approve? Mr. Deneen, seconded by Mr. Burke. All in favor? Minutes of the regular meeting held May 14th. Mr. Burke and Mrs. Ritchie. All in favor? Minutes of the special meeting held on June 4th, 2019. Mrs. Ritchie And Mr. Maroney, all in favor? And minutes of the special meeting and executive session held on June 7th, 2019. May I have a motion? Mrs. McCammon and Mr. Burke, all in favor? Great, thank you. We will move on to board committee reports. Are there any this evening?
You can go first.
Mr. Denis.
So, following up on Tara's comment, I'm happy to say that at the RTM meeting last night, all the resolutions were passed. There were several resolutions, one for the building committee itself, one for moving forward with schematics and construction drawings, and one for actually applying for the grant. Our goal has always been to apply for state aid for the building of the Oxford Elementary School. The due date for applying for state aid is June 30th. It's not the normal way we go about building buildings in town by not having drawings done and schematics and having overall understanding of the costs. It's a little bit of an airball, but it's an airball that's backed up by all the architectural firms that we met with and their cost estimates and cost projections. So we have to go to the state with an overall cost projection. We have to go with a resolution for full funding of the building of the school, and we have to go to the state with several other requirements, including enrollment, a site survey, and other requirements that are on a checklist. So we're on schedule to do that. The approval last night was for the full $63 million, which is the projected funding for the new Oxford Elementary school. Next steps are June 19th. We're back up meeting with the state to go over where we are. The state continues to encourage us to stay the course and apply for the funding. The risk for not making the June 30th deadline is it delays the overall project by a year. It also goes down the path of potentially less funding or no funding as the state continues to look at its debt service and its overall financial wherewithal. And then we're scheduled to work with the Board of Ed administration with Mr. Feeney and Mr. Lynch. We've got a tentative date of June 26th to submit the grant application, which is due by the 30th, so that gives us some dates. So Mr. Feeney will not be leaving us until that grant application is submitted to the state now. And
We could all vote no tonight.
The administration, Mr. Feeney, Dr. Landon, all the administration team, Mr. Lynch, Luke Forshaw on that team, the building committee. It's been an incredible team effort so far, and it's moved along very well. So that's the update for now.
Great,
When do we
thank
hear
you.
about the grant
So-
due?
So great question. So we submit the grant on June 30th, and we will hear on or about December 15th if we make the list, which we're told we'll make the list. And then in January, we'll be given a letter. It's a good question. And during that time, everything continues. We're finalizing contract negotiations with SLAM, which is the architect. We're finalizing contract negotiations with the construction manager and the project manager. All that will continue, and that's the goal as we wait to hear from the state.
Great. Mrs. Ritchie.
Yes, so we had a budget committee meeting on May 22nd, but before I go into my report, I just wanted to thank Michael Feeney for your hard work, your responsiveness, your integrity, your attention to detail. I think having you on our side for excess costs, transportation, everything has been very reassuring to me, and we will miss you, and I wish you the best of luck. And that's it. So now on to my report. So we met on the 22nd of May, and we went through the financial report for, this is our fourth meeting. We meet quarterly. We met in September, November, February, and May, and we went through the usual transfers and report. I will say this meeting was a little bit unusual. There were some questions on process and policy, and I think those are good discussions to have, and I always encourage committee members to, first of all, attend meetings and ask questions, and specifically ask questions in public, because I think our questions are important, and they may be questions that other people on the Board of Ed have, or potentially in the public. So I encourage people to attend, do their homework, and on that note, I think we've gotten some emails from council because there were some questions about policy, and I think, in my opinion, our practice goes beyond what our policy states and what our state statute requires. I believe our process is important because it's transparent and it makes financial sense. I do think that maybe the terminology can be confusing, and perhaps the board can look into maybe changing what we call transfers, but aren't really considered transfers in the eyes of the state law. And I think that would help to clarify things going forward, so there isn't a question there, and I don't want to go into too much detail and bore people with this, but there are differences between movements between accounts, so I would call them as account adjustments, and things that are required pursuant to the statutes and therefore covered by our policy. I think it's going forward, we need to make sure that that's clear, because there is a difference. There are things that we need to approve, and there are things that we actually aren't required to approve, but I think we get more information than we're actually required. And I applaud Mike, because you give us great detail, you give us great facts, you give us great information. So I think going forward, maybe Mike can touch on that at some point, but we need to clear that up, because I don't think it's a good idea to have confusion when we come into these meetings. And I welcome during our discussions on the budget later on in the meeting that people ask their questions in public and we talk about it in public, because that's where this should happen. It should happen at a public meeting. So I'll leave the rest to later when we get to the report.
Mr. Maroney.
Yeah, just a quick update on the Facilities Committee. We met June 7th and had further discussions on the storage facility at the Darien High School for the athletic equipment. That is still ongoing. We hope to be presenting something to the board shortly, as well as we had discussions about the removal of the temporary structures, otherwise known as portables, at Hindley and Holmes, and hope to have a report on that as well.
Great, thank you. We will move on to presentation and discussions. Up first is a report on the senior internship project at Darien High School. Mrs. Dunn.
Good evening. I would like to introduce Ann Branca and Matt Bukta, who are our advisors for the senior internship, and they will introduce some of our students who will tell you what they've been up to these last few weeks.
Good evening. We'd like to thank you for the opportunity to update you on our senior internship program. It's an awesome opportunity for our senior students. As you know, this is kind of our transition program from high school to college, starting typically after the AP exams and extending this year until this Thursday. And it's an opportunity for students to go out and experience kind of the real world throughout the end of their high school days. So we're going to talk a little bit about the program. I don't know, how do we use this to move on? Yes? I don't know how to.
Yeah, so there's an arrow at the top. Right, Mr. Bukta to the right? Okay.
More right.
No.
This one?
Okay, we have to ask, what happened? We look this way.
Yes.
Hey, yeah, love the technology, okay.
Okay. Excuse our backs, everybody.
We got it.
Disappeared before.
All right, I'm glad we figured that out. So we had the majority of our seniors participate again this year, which is great. And for students who chose not to participate, they just continued to attend their classes at Darien High School, and some teachers assign projects, so there's opportunities for those students as well. But it's nice to see so many students choosing to do an internship, which is great. As in the past few years, we still continue to use the Darien High School Senior Internship Program website, which has been really helpful for just streamlining information, sending updates to students, sending them information, helps us get access to information as well, and just data analysis overall, which has been really helpful, and we'll probably continue to use that next year as well. I know no one can read those right now, but basically our students are all over the place doing a variety of internships, from engineering firms to elementary schools, and we have some students here tonight who are going to get to talk to you a little bit about where they are and what their experience has been like. So a lot of places. Throughout their internships, students are completing 30 hours per week at their internship site. And in addition to that, they're also reading this book called The Bigs by Ben Carpenter. And this book is really just a lot of good life advice. It gives a lot of information about securing internships, the importance of internships, how to do well at an internship, how to secure a job down the road, happiness. So it's a lot of, it's kind of like a nice life advice book for them to read as they're completing their internship experience. And as they read this book, we actually have them respond to journal prompts. So we have them read excerpts of the book, and then we have them respond to some journal prompts related to those excerpts, as well as talking about what their experience at their internship has been like. So throughout the time, they're reading the book, they're completing their hours, they're working with their faculty mentor and their site supervisor at their internship, and all of this is culminating to a presentation at the end. And this year we're doing something called the Senior Internship Symposium, which is a little different than last year's and previous year's internship fair. So I'll turn over to Matt to talk a little bit about what that change is.
So as in past years, we've had a senior internship fair. It looks like there's one more after that, Ian. Nope. Apparently that was it. Okay, so we've had a senior internship fair where students have created poster presentations held in the gym and have met with their faculty mentors. Students go out on internship, they get a site mentor at the place they happen to intern at, as well as a mentor from Darien High School who checks in at least weekly with them, how's it going, and reads the journals and responses. This year we've updated the poster format to more of a TED Talk style presentation, where students will be making a short digital presentation and presenting to about groups of 10 students and a couple of faculty mentors about their experience, what they've learned, and how it's going to impact them going forward. The desire was to make it a little bit more 21st century skills and communication skill increases. So we're looking forward to that. That's going to be this Friday from 1 to 2 p.m. You're all welcome to attend. Students will be in groups of about 10 in our B building. So you'll find students all over the place there if you're interested to hear about what they've been doing, although we have a few here tonight as well. Let's see, where's the thing? So how our students are evaluated throughout the program is basically meeting the requirements. So the journal reflections and the quality and responsiveness of the journals, meeting the hour requirements, and then as well as their presentation at our symposium. Students will either earn a recognition of pass with distinction, pass, or incomplete. So that'll be happening kind of in the internship symposium. You've heard about us talk about what the program is all about, but I think maybe it's more useful for the students to tell you what they've learned through the experience. So we have about 6 students here tonight. I'll talk to you a little bit about it. We'd like to thank them for coming tonight to share their experience. But we'll start with Nathan Whitaker. He'll talk about his experience at Sound Waters, and then we'll rotate through.
Hi, my name's Nathan Whitaker, and I work at Sound Waters over in Stamford. So if you don't know what Sound Waters is, it's basically an educational sort of facility that's all about the environment, and it teaches kids ages pre-K up till around 7th grade. And there's a large variety of sort of lessons that we do. So I've done things such as canoeing, bird migration, like watching birds basically, to water quality and pH testing, all through all ages, also a lot of education on animals. And I was an APE student this year, which is environmental studies, so being able to apply knowledge that I learned in the classroom to the real world, get hands-on experience, learn interesting things about animals, and then have fun the whole time. It's a pretty interesting way to apply the experience that I've had and get to know not only other people who are interested in that sort of field, but also be able to work with kids. So if I want to do an educational career, I could work alongside, I could gain the experience from this and try to use that later on in my life. So there's a lot of different experience that I'm getting from this one internship, which has definitely helped me to decide my career path in the future.
Hi, my name is Sophia Cordelesi, and I've been interning at the Orthopedic Foundation in Stamford. The Orthopedic Foundation was created by Dr. Plancher, who's an orthopedic surgeon, as a way to educate people about injury prevention. He also uses it as a home base for his clinical trial studies. So most of the time I've been contacting patients to compile data about how whatever their affected body part was, how that's feeling. So mostly I've been working on knee replacements, sending people surveys to fill out, and then trying to assess their response. And then one day I got to shadow Dr. Plancher at his clinic in New York City, and I spent the day interacting with patients and watching him interact, and he gave me and the other intern from Darien that was working with him a lot of insight into how he interacts with patients and why he treats certain patients in different ways. So that's my internship.
Hi, my name is Ria Dole, and I'm interning at Untitled Capital, which is basically an investment company based in Norwalk. So what they do is they acquire non-performing and sub-performing loans and restructure these loans and try to get them to sort of a performing level. So what I'm doing at this internship is I'm doing a lot of underwriting, and they're opening a new portfolio, which is why I'm working on it a lot. So I'm going through appraisals and various documents, as well as looking at the property on Google Maps, doing my research over on the person requesting the loan, looking at the property they put up as collateral, determining basically the risk of taking on this sub-performing loan, and evaluating whether or not it would be a good decision for this company to take on that loan. And yeah, as someone who wants to go into the finance industry maybe after college, I think this was a really good experience because I got to know the industry pretty much, and I actually learned a lot because I didn't know how to underwrite a portfolio. I didn't know what half these words meant, sub-performing, non-performing loans, but now I do, and that's helpful. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Stephen Wood, and I'm interning at the Radio Guest Quest, or the Art Sears Company. And what I do is I actually connect radio stations with celebrity guest stars from across the entire nation. I'm going to have Howie Mandel on air tomorrow, and I've been working with the lawyers of Ryan Reynolds, Kylie Jenner, people like that. I'm going to get the son of Ozzy Osbourne on air in a couple weeks, because I'm going to work there over the summer. And I've learned a lot of really important skills from this job, mostly communication and actually speaking and dealing with celebrities and radio stations alike, because they are very difficult to deal with, but they're very, very interesting characters, and I'm having a lot of fun with it. As someone that wants to go into the film and communications industry, working with publicists, agents, and everyone behind the scenes, and really getting a look at how the world works, it's really cool, and I have a lot of fun there.
Hi, my name is Kason Stone, and I'm interning at Roan Apparel. Roan is a startup clothing company in Stanford, and while we do a lot of small, busy intern work, we get to work pretty closely with a lot of different departments, be it aiding with marketing plans or visiting different retail locations and getting feedback on the product. We also have an ongoing report of the best lunch spots in Stanford. We get to work pretty closely with Roan's CEO, Nate Checkitts, and I think I've learned a lot about being a meaningful part of a business, especially a startup, and also about running a business successfully. So, yeah, it's been a good experience.
Evening. I'm Aaron Russell. I interned at Franklin Street Works, which is a contemporary art gallery in Stanford. It's open Thursdays through Sundays after 12, so feel free to stop by. The current exhibition, and the one I was involved in, is titled Collective Action Archive Redux, which is a reproduction of one of their previous displays, the works of activist groups that are also self-described artist collectives. Among other research-based activities, I helped curate a self-guided tour, and I networked with organizations to provide ASL and Spanish language tours. I also helped weed their garden. It's pretty cool. I developed research skills and analytical writing skills. I also learned how to garden, which was cool. But I was also open to the world of experimental art and contemporary activism. I learned about the forms of discrimination that artists face, but importantly, how they overcome them, which was incredibly empowering. Thank you.
So as you can see, our students really go to a wide variety of different types of internships, and they really have quite an experience. Many of them do end up with summer jobs or further internships after, which is really a wonderful thing. So that's basically our program. If you have any questions?
Sure. Any board comments and questions? Mrs. Ritchie.
I noticed there's a slight dip in participation. I'm wondering, just in general, why a student would not participate? Is it lack of opportunity or lack of just wanting to stay in school? Is there an underlying reason or various reasons?
Oh, I don't know.
I don't think there's an underlying reason. I think for some students, they may have had experience in the workplace. We have some students who hold jobs full time. I also think that some of our students who are engaged in a particular AP Physics class want to see that through. And so we have a small group of students who stay behind. We had some students who needed to stay with us to complete their credits. And so there's a little bit of that as well, and we were happy to have them do that so they're ready to celebrate their graduation next week.
We're not
so.
laughing at students, we're
No.
laughing with them.
That's right.
We understand.
Luckily, we have this little period of time to wrap around and bring it home. Exactly.
Thank you, Alan.
Mrs. McAdam.
Thank you very much to the students and you all for that description. Can you, since the program or the experience of the program is so dependent on the place where the kids are interning, and we don't have control over that, can you talk about how you would decide whether or not a student passes or passes with distinction?
So one thing that we do for hopefully to ensure a meaningful experience, is sites are vetted. So before students submit a plan about what they intend to do and where they intend to do it, and they partner with a faculty mentor. That mentor calls the site and speaks to their site mentor before the internship begins. We review their plan. It's approved by their parents, the internship program, the site, and the in-school mentor. And then throughout the internship, the school mentor will visit the internship site to see what's that site about, what's the experience like, to make sure it's meaningful and appropriate. In terms of the evaluation, there is a rubric that exists that identifies how students meet some of the programmatic criteria, like the hours, doing their journals, the quality of the journal writing, as well as the presentation that they're going to do this week.
Thank you.
Yep.
Mrs. McNamara.
Then on the other end, as we don't have control of the intern sites, can you talk about how that relationship starts? How do the students find them? They find the students? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. There's two ways. One benefit of the internship site that we have is it catalogs all prior internship sites. So there's a listing of, I don't even want to throw out a number, it's probably 250, 300 sites that students have been at in the past, which can serve as a ready reference. It's categorized by skill, interest, and students do interest inventories in school, and if they have a certain area they're interested in, they can find sites there and contacts. Other students find them all independently, so each year we do end up with new sites that we haven't had before, and some of that's various contacts the students may have, or some of them cold call, which is great too.
And then all gets archived into this for the next year?
For the next year,
okay,
that's right.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, just as a parent who's had 2 children go through this program, it's a wonderful experience, and it's great for the kids, I think. My question is, how do we judge or metric how good of experience they have at an internship? And are there different degrees of good, bad, fair, or how do we do that?
Yeah, I would say that, as with all things in life, you get out of it what you put into it. And certainly different students go in with different mindsets and attitudes and approaches than others. And sometimes we find that the internships that sound really good on the onset maybe turn out to be a little different than expected, which is a good growth and learning experience as well. So I would say it's somewhat student dependent, but part of that is the reflective process in the journals, where we ask students, what are your weeks like, what are you doing? And we also ask them to read the bigs and get some sense of what internships could be or might be like. And that's part of that relationship with the faculty mentor, which does read the journals each week. And there's the opportunity to write a response to the student as well about what's going on. And we encourage students to reach out if there's any kind of issue as well with their internship sites.
But so in the juniors this year, do they have an opportunity to read the journals of the exiting seniors to see how well or not they enjoyed their time at that internship? How do they know how what that experience was like and how can they improve or in that
Excellent.
experience.
So one thing that we do is we're going to send out a survey at the end of the internship experience that's asking seniors to, both to the school mentor and to the seniors, asking them to evaluate their sites and what the experience was like, would they recommend it or not. So that's some real-time feedback, which allows us to maybe cull some sites that were not as effective, again, provided the feedback is
Perfect.
accurate. So does that?
Yep, that's exactly what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So just a big thank you both to the students for taking the risk and going out into the world, and to the staff for supporting kids getting real world experience and taking their education and putting it to work. So congratulations to all that are here, and please extend our congratulations and thanks to all the other students.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We will move on to a report on high school college acceptances and awards, profile on the school class of 2019 and post high school plans. Mrs. Dunn and Mr. Blank.
Just the arrow. Okay, thank you. Sorry, Susie, which one is it? The top one?
The top one, I think. I thought you opened it already, though.
Yeah, no, Mr. Feeney's internship. Is this it? Yeah, that's it. Okay. Terry, do you want me to wait a minute or should I proceed?
Oh, just go.
Okay, just go. Okay. Yes, this little arrow up here, I think, right? I'm notorious for not clicking as I speak, so hopefully I'll be able to do two things at once. So, good evening. Thank you all so much for allowing me to present some really wonderful plans from our graduating class, the class of 2019. What a fantastic class this is. They are fun, they are creative, they are committed to their school and to their community. Their futures are so bright, and it has been a true joy to watch them to grow into amazing young adults over the last 4 years. We are proud and privileged to work in Darien every year, but it's a particularly special year when you're named number one. And so we really think that that's a tribute to our fantastic kids, our very talented faculty and leadership, both at the building level and at the central office level, and certainly a huge reflection of the support of this board. So we just wanted to take a minute to thank you for all the hard work that you do on behalf of the schools and on behalf of kids. As we present plans for the class of 2019, I did want to take just a brief moment to acknowledge and celebrate the really hard work of our school counselors at Darien High School. We are so fortunate to have such a committed group of professionals that bring so much love and passion to the work that they do with kids, especially through the post-high school process. So I just wanted to give a little shout out to them because they are truly an amazing group. Many of us were really privileged to be a part of the Awards and Scholarships Night a few weeks ago. And one of the things I love about this night is it celebrates not just the work that our kids do in the classrooms, but on the courts and on the fields, in our community, and in service to each other and to the school. The award recipients were honored for their character, their spirit, their kindness, and the ways in which they impact our school and the greater world around them. And it was a special reflection of this class, and so I just wanted to celebrate those as well. I like numbers and statistics, so I thought I'd throw a few out at you just to get the party started tonight. We have 340 students in this class, and as a student who went to a K-12 school, we used to refer to students who were with us the entire time as lifers. And so I was a little curious, so I did a little digging and found out that 152 of our graduates were also in our kindergarten class back in 2006. So I thought that was kind of a cool number. 96% of our class have applied to at least one college, with 99% of them being accepted to at least one. So we're really proud of those numbers. 63% of our DHS seniors were accepted to at least half the schools that they applied to. Again, really impressive. We had 4 presidential scholarship candidates, 21 National Merit Commended Scholars, 9 National Merit finalists, and 1 Governor's Scholar. 10 students this year will take gap years. Some are academic programs, some are service-oriented, some involve travel, some are pursuing a hobby or a passion, either personal or athletic. 80% of those students applied to and were accepted to college, so they're already in. We have students attending West Point, the Air Force Academy, the Citadel, and also a student who is on a full Naval ROTC scholarship. 4 will study in other countries, including Scotland, England, and Canada. So those are the kind of interesting numbers. Let's see if I can now work this. Okay, so this is the summary information for our class. So as you'll see, more than 92% are pursuing higher education in the fall. We are finding that a larger number of students are starting to explore other opportunities and experiences, many of them with the full intent of pursuing higher education. But as we said, 80% of our gap years have already been accepted. But we're really proud of them for thinking outside of the box a little bit and following their passions or their interests or taking advantage of some opportunities. The other category includes students who are taking gap years, so a couple students that are undecided about what their future plans will be, deciding between college and some other opportunities, students who are continuing beyond a 4th year of high school or participating in other educational programs, and several students that are pursuing personal or athletic interests. And again, as part of the other data, a few kids who have been accepted to college but are deciding between that opportunity and something else. So on the college application analysis, we actually our office processed 3,250 application materials. As you'll see, that's up about 270 applications from last year. That information went to 405 different schools. This represents an overall application number and does not reflect the withdrawn or the incomplete application. So students will submit transcript request forms asking us to send their transcripts, their letters of recommendation, our school profile to schools, and we'll process that. And then sometime between the time that we do that and the time that they apply, they make the decision to either withdraw their applications or not to complete them. So once we figure in the withdrawals and the incompletes, we had a total of 2,329 completed applications, or an average completed application per student of 6.9. That's extremely consistent. I think last year it was 6.8. So that's consistent with previous years. And that number's remained consistent over the past 4 years. 41% of our students applied under an early decision plan, again, very consistent with previous years, and 65% of the students who applied early decision were accepted. Our students are enrolling in 148 different schools this year, also very consistent. Last year was 147, the year before was 146. So we're being very consistent in that way. This is a little bit more in depth about our early decision. As I said, we're doing very, very well in the early decision pools. Our acceptances were up a few points from last year. 62% of the students who applied under the early decision plan were admitted in the initial round, with an additional 3% first being deferred and then being accepted during the regular pool. Overall, the early decision data has remained relatively consistent over the past 4 years. You will notice that there is, I believe in your packets, the difference between there's early decision applications at 154 that was applied by 141 students, and I know most of you know that you're only supposed to have one application out, one early decision application out at a time. So that discrepancy comes with something that's a relatively new trend called early decision 2. So that happens a little bit later. It is a binding early decision plan, usually happens in January. So what those numbers suggest are those students that either did not get into their ED1 and submitted an ED2 application, or some students who may have applied to an ED1 and had us send materials without actually submitting an application. So some of those were incomplete or withdrawn, those ED2s, because they actually did get into their ED1s. So that's where that discrepancy comes from, is capturing some of those early decision 2s. So these are the most applications. We call it the Darien dozen. There's not a huge number of surprises on this. There were a few that seemed to jump a little bit. Fordham had quite a more apps this year. Penn State went up a little bit. A couple from last year might have fallen off this list, but generally the list is fairly consistent. If you look at chart number 7 in your packet, you have a list of school by percentage of acceptances. So we group it by sort of the highest percentage of acceptances and some of the lower acceptances. Each year we look at the schools with the more selective rates and where the percentages might be a little bit lower. And I think it's important to note that in 15 of 20 that are listed on that chart, we were actually higher than the national average in terms of acceptances. So even though it might be lower than some of the other schools, we're, I think, in general doing much better than nationally than they're doing. Even when looking at national averages, I also think it's important to consider that we're also talking about a really small sample size. So in most cases, so if a school is accepting 30% of an application pool of 40,000, we might be sending 3 applications, and one of our students is getting in, and that can skew those percentages as well. Every year, if we're looking at something and we don't think that we're not doing as well with a particular school that we'd like, we certainly focus on outreach to that school to understand what they're looking for from kids, what their profile is, to help to continue to forge a relationship, to help them to understand our kids, our programs, our opportunities. So we are constantly looking at that data and building relationships based on it. Chart number 9 in your packet will show a little bit about our Ivy analysis. We're always really proud of how our kids do in this process overall, and we also do very, very well with the Ivies. This year we saw some exciting increases in acceptances at a number of the Ivies, including Princeton, Dartmouth, Cornell, and Harvard. Our acceptance and enrollment rates are up slightly this year. 22% of the students who applied to Ivy League schools were accepted, and 5.6% of the class will be enrolling. Fairly stable over time, again, up a little bit from last year where it was 19% and 5.2% respectively, but pretty consistent. And again, we look at those numbers every year and continue to do outreach whenever needed. This is our most attended. Again, not many huge surprises. We did have Miami University of Ohio actually doubled this year. They went from 6 attending last year to 12 attending. And then UVM, which was near the top last year, fell off a little bit. So, there's lots of reasons for that, and there's speculation for why that may be. Sometimes it's really a matter of the rep outreach. So if we have a representative who comes and really does some significant outreach to our families, or a couple of years ago, Santa Clara was on our panel, and we saw a huge spike that year in kids going to Santa Clara because they were developing a relationship. So sometimes there's an alum who comes back and has had a really great experience and starts a buzz in town about their particular school, word of mouth. Sometimes we have pockets of kids who go to school together. So there's a lot of reasons that sometimes we'll see a little bit of a jump in that. But again, generally speaking, this has been very consistent. Geographically, no big changes in terms of the geographic disbursement of where our kids are going. We still have about a quarter of our kids who are staying in the Northeast. And again, staying in the Northeast, and we have 4 kids, again, going overseas to study in Scotland, England, and Canada. State schools, we actually saw, I thought, a really nice increase in applications this year. So we were up 27 applications to state schools. Unfortunately, we didn't see that translate necessarily to enrollment, although we were really excited about the NCC enrollment. We have 7 kids enrolling at NCC. And we just think that NCC is just an amazing local option, and they have such tremendous programs and do a wonderful job with helping kids to transfer, and so we were really excited to see that kids were taking advantage of that. We do take a number of interested students to a program every year called NCC Live in the spring, and so it's always a really wonderful opportunity to sit on a class, they get to talk to professors, and so we're thinking that that program is also really helping kids to make some decisions to continue with their education, so we're really excited about that. And then this is our standardized testing averages and also GPA, and as you can see over time, remain very strong, very impressive, and very consistent. So, and then I did want to just reference on chart number 11, I just wanted to help to interpret. Chart number 11 is the one that lists the application results by school. So if you're going from left to right, the net apply reflects the number of transcript requests that we got, less the withdrawals and the incompletes. If you go from right to left, sometimes those numbers in terms of admit, deny, waitlist doesn't add up to the net apply. That's because we haven't included the unknowns, where we just haven't been able to gather that data from students, or the students who left their applications in a deferment status. So if it doesn't add up, it's really just reflecting those 2 particular data points. And that, I think, is all. I'm happy to take questions.
So great. Thank you very much for
You're
that
welcome.
comprehensive report. My mic is funny tonight. Questions or comments? Mr. Berg.
Just a comment. Congratulations to you and your staff. I mean, this is where really the rubber meets the road. I mean, we all want our students to have a wonderful experience K through 12, but you know, graduation is Judgment Day. This is a results-oriented town and populace, and this is a superior result, however you calculate it and present it. So congratulations to you, your staff, and thank you for your work.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate that. Mrs. McCannum.
I echo my colleagues' comments. Thank you. This is a tremendous amount of work. Two comments. The first is in that other category.
Yes.
I would love in the future to see a few things pulled out of it. I know there's some kids that we put into transition programs or into vocational programs, and while I would like to respect everybody's privacy, I think it's important that we see that there are kids where some of our children go who don't go on to college, and I would love to know as a board what's happening.
So just the numbers or particular programs that they're attending?
Personally, I would like to know what's happening, but I understand that you all may have to look at that for privacy. So
yes, we would. Yeah.
So I'll leave that to you.
Okay, thank you.
That also depends on if it's self-reported, right?
Yeah, so we try and gather outcome data from every student, and some students, depending on what they're doing, some students at this point are undecided. So
sure.
But they also don't have to report that.
That's correct.
Sure.
That is correct.
And may I just add,
Mine's quiet, yours is super loud.
may I just add one thing to what Megan's presenting also? It may also be that students are they're still receiving education up to 21.
Sure.
So it's not part of a graduation cohort because they continue to receive a program. So
Sure.
it may not be reported in the same field.
But at some point, so
We can
whatever
certainly
is
update that.
appropriate.
Yes.
I just think that we need to know that these students are being supported out of the school system.
And I think there's a way we can do a crosswalk. We might present it as part of our presentation on special education services because it's still part of continuation of services. So perhaps we can incorporate it that way.
Sure.
Okay.
Sounds
Thanks.
good. Thank you.
I think the ED results are fantastic. I think it's great that students are taking advantage of that. I was wondering if there was any way in the future that we could show that by school, I'm more curious to see that data. And I don't know if it's something you can add to that chart that you have at the end. So
We can look at it. Sometimes we're concerned about drilling down that far just for the sake of student confidentiality and anonymity. In a lot of those cases, it was one student who may or may not have gotten in, and so we're just in those cases. But we
Right.
certainly have a conversation about
if
it.
it's something you can do, that would be just that would be great. Thank you.
The statistics.
Mrs.
Yep.
McNamara.
Well, similarly, when you, in your college application results where you list all the schools, there's often you list one application, so we know that's one child applied to that one school. So we are giving some, so list one program may not be inappropriate because we are doing it by the colleges. Thank you so much for this thorough report. My question was more on, from your perspective, looking at the student body. So we're seeing one fewer student from this year from last, though the applications, 62 more applications. How much work is involved in that? Or are you equipped if you keep seeing that movement? I don't know how your job works. Is that easy of just hitting a button? Or
In terms of processing
Correct.
we are so fortunate. I'm old enough to have been part of the paper movement, where I was signing every transcript and standing at the photocopier. So we are so fortunate that the district supports the use of Naviance. So in many ways, it is just clicking. And part of this is we also. So on one hand, I don't mind that doesn't cause more work, although we are having very careful conversations with students about having a manageable list, because then they have a big decision to make at the end. So if they're if they're applying to a lot of schools and they're getting into a lot of schools, and they have a big decision that they're trying to decide. So even though it's not much more work per se, we still are having really thoughtful conversations with students about creating a manageable, applying to a manageable number of schools to make that decision manageable. So it's still a consideration how many application students are submitting.
So that 9 number seemed to be, it was what, 9.6 is your average?
6.9 was the average completed. I actually love that number. I used to say 6 to 8, so I was thrilled to see it was 7. Like that was I was statistically right this entire time. So I mean, as a counselor, I always said 6 to 8.
Okay, perfect.
And that's the way it's working out. So
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Maroney.
Yeah, I would like to congratulate you and thank you for all this work. And I too am a data person, so I just wanted to share some data that I accumulated as well, because I think there's more schools than the 8 Ivy League schools. And so I went through the U.S. News World Report, and the top 20 universities, I just picked a random number. There were 248 students who applied, 72% of the class. Now that is obviously skewed because many will probably apply to more. But 17% were accepted, and 11.5 will attend. And then I also went down and drilled down to the liberal arts colleges, which includes schools like Amherst, Williams, Bowdoin, Middlebury, Colgate, Washington, and Lee. 32% applied to those, 12% were accepted, and 5.5% will attend. So out of the top 40 schools, you could say, in the country, we're having over 17% of the students attend those top 40 schools, which I think is pretty extraordinary.
I love those numbers. I'm taking notes on how to.
But I do have a question, or I have a couple of questions. But one question is, can you talk about, in your report, and there was one school in particular for me which stood out was Bucknell, and we had 20 applicants and 0 are attending. And in years past, we've had 5 or 6 or more students attend that school.
Yes.
How does that reflect back to Darien when you have students apply and then not go? Does that become a black mark on our school for future students, and how do we manage that? Or how do you manage that?
I think I can, let's see. I'd have to get to you might have the numbers more directly in front of you. 7 were accepted. So I think in that particular example with Bucknell, at this stage, I wouldn't be too worried about that because, as to your point, we have sent many students to Bucknell. It has been historically a popular school. I don't have specifics as to why we're not sending anybody there this year. Again, there are just little spikes and dips. And I mean, we do have students sometimes who feel like if there's a school that's been really, really popular for a really long time, that they'd like to go someplace else because there are a lot of students from their high school there and they'd like to have a little bit of a difference. If that trend were to continue, then I think, into next year, we'd start to, ask some questions and look at that. In terms of whether or not it's a black mark, I think it is something that colleges look at as to if we're accepting your kids and you're not going. We get that question when reps come to visit, like if we have a sense, we have those conversations, as you likely know. 250 reps visit Darien High School every year, and they meet one-on-one, every one of them, with a high school counselor to have some of these conversations. And sometimes that comes up in conversations, and so we'll go back and we'll ask the questions. We'll look at the kids who didn't go there and see where they went. And so over time, if it starts to become a pattern, then we work really hard with those schools to make sure that it doesn't become a reflection on Darien. We don't want it to be. So we are looking at if a pattern starts to emerge, how we can work with the school to determine what is preventing students from enrolling there.
Mrs. McCannon.
Picking up a little bit on what Dennis referred to in the beginning, I really, again, appreciate how much data is here. And one of the things you all have done in the past couple of years is start to broaden a little bit, talk about kids going to the military, art school, things like that. The Ivies are great, but I would love for us to think a little, can we think about how we're preparing students for college and what kind of colleges they're going to? So who all are going to MIT and California Institute of Technology? I'd love to see some of that aggregated so that we can kind of see some of the different kinds of tracks that kids take. Are we sending any kids to ag schools? I don't know, but I would love to see from this not only where they're going geographically, but what other information can we get about what decisions kids are making in their college?
And I think it's a great lens to look at. The thing, I give a lot of walk-in talks, we call them tours, and one of the things that I say to the families who come, I said, it sounds a little braggy. I said, but one of the things I love and appreciate most about Darien High School is that whoever you are, whatever you love, you have a chance to do it at a really high level. So, we're very well known for our sports, but our artists, award-winning, our theater program, award-winning, our engineering program, our computer science program. And so whoever those kids are, so if a kid wants to go to art school, they go all the way through AP Studio Art and are very well prepared. If a student is into computers, they can go all the way through the AP Computer Science. With your support, we have a brand new computer science and more entry level that's going to expose kids, at a younger age to that. So I think in terms of preparation, our curriculum has allowed us to prepare students for whatever path that they want to choose, which is really exciting. I don't feel like curriculum-wise or preparation-wise any door is closed to our kids, and that's tremendously exciting.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I'd love to see some of those paths really pulled out in
Okay.
the data.
Thank you.
Mr. Maroney.
I would like to build on what Ms. McCammon has just mentioned, and I think, for me, what Mr. Burke said, this is the culmination of our work for K through 12, and I would like to amend that a little bit, and I think we also have the work the students have more work to do to graduate college, because that's just, it's the stepping stone to get into college, and then it's the graduating. And I'd really love to have some data and surveys done on the former students of Darien High of how many are graduating in 4 years, 5 years, how many are dropping out. And to Jill's point, because I've heard stories of friends of mine who, I'm hearing numbers of up to 40 students have left university this year as a freshman. So you're talking 10% of the class. Now, is that why? We may not know, but if we can begin to ask those questions, maybe we can find some data. Maybe it's to Jill's point. Maybe they're going too far away. Maybe they're going to too big of a school, too small of a school. But if we can begin to accumulate that data, we can begin to formulate why and maybe tailor instruction better to help serve those students. And I really think it's vitally important for that.
So I'm so glad you brought that up, because I'm thrilled to be able to say we've already started that.
Excellent.
One of our counselors developed, we wanted to capture a few things. We wanted to capture certainly some of the transfer piece, because that has been a concern that we've heard expressed. The preparation piece, did you feel that our curriculum or our plans, fully prepared you? And also that next step piece. What are you planning to do? What are you planning to do with all this wonderful education that you've been going through? So right now, the plan is we've already sent out the survey actually to last year's graduating class, the class of 2018, to gather some information about how was your first year, how did it go, did you submit a transfer request, and then the long-term plan is to do it towards the end of their fourth year as well. The personal email address piece becomes a little tricky in terms of gathering that, but we're looking at different ways to gather that so that we can stay in touch with students and gather some of those outcomes. So that's definitely part of the work that we're doing.
Dr. Landon? No, that's okay, gotta wait.
I think when you start going out 4 or 5 years, you're right about the email issue. I know of several school districts that have contracted with private firms that measure where the kids, or try to locate where the kids are, what their experience has been 5 years after they graduate and 10 years after.
Yes.
Now, there's no way you can really do that, because you begin to lose kids. Their email addresses change. Their parents move out of town.
Correct.
Nobody can locate them, but these companies do.
Correct.
And all you have to do is contract with them for a substantial sum, I must admit, but they do it.
That's a matter for the board, I guess. There is a clearinghouse that has been in existence for a number of years, and that's where we have been pulling over the past few years some of that data. So it is a little bit it is a little bit of self-report on the kids. So I think we were looking to really tone in on our graduates and make sure that we captured as many as we could to start to gather some of that data. So we should have some information on that soon.
Mr. Burke.
I appreciate those comments, and I appreciate the amount of work you're doing. I would caution the amount of additional hours that we spend tracking the outcomes in college. We spend thousands of hours getting our students, whether they decide to go into agriculture or business or the military, to get them into a spot where they make an intelligent choice with their parents. Most of these institutions are costing $70,000 a year, so I think at a certain point, the parents, we as parents have to take some responsibility for the choices our children are making and we are making with them, because I just think that we're getting them into a spot where they have the ability to make these choices, and I think that these students need to make those choices in conjunction with their families, and we can chase data points until forever, but I think if it's something that's not an immense amount of work to pursue and you're already doing it unsurprisingly, that's fine, but I would just be very reticent to change the mission of the schools to track what happens after they leave our district.
Mrs. McNamara.
Well, staying on that point of post-Darien High School, if a student who is enrolled in a college and chooses to transfer after their first semester, do they need to come back to Darien High School for information?
So
The receiving institution.
it really depends on what the new school they're applying to is requesting. If they're requesting a high school transcript, if it's after a semester or two, they often will request a high school transcript. If they're further along in their collegiate, they may only want the collegiate transcript.
So that information would be, I would just say that information may be more readily available because they're coming to Darien High School rather than you trying to tease it out of the students and track them down. You're actually getting
In terms of, we do have an idea of the transfers in terms of the number of students who request it. It may not capture everybody because they may not have that, but we have rough numbers. They don't always tell us what happens, right? So we may have a student who says, can you send my transcript to these 5 schools? But I don't necessarily, unless I follow up with them, know if they decided to stay at their first school, if they decided to transfer, where they decided to transfer. But we do have some numbers based on the number of requests that we get for transfers.
Okay, great, thank you.
Mr. Maroney.
Going back to my data collection for graduates, I think it's important for the schools, but I also think it can be used as a resource. And students, what I've seen in human resources in certain places, there's the quintessential career ladder where you go up your ladder and this is your next step and this is your next step. But I've also seen some things which are career journeys, and people can meander, and you get to this point here, and then what you can do is click on that person and see how they got there, and it can be a great resource for students to say, this is what I want to do at some point. How did they get there? How did they get there? And you can go back to look at students who graduated from Darien High and say, wow, there are multiple ways for me to get to where I want to go, and I don't have to go down the one track my parents are telling me to go, because that's really not what I want to do, but I want to get to that point. And I think it could be a great resource if we can do that work.
And just again, going back to some students who are choosing to do really awesome, wonderful, important things next year that outside of going to a 2 or 4 year school, the fact that we're seeing an increase in that, I think is really exciting, because I think they are starting to say there are other things that I can do. I'll go to college next year or soon, but I really want to go do this thing that I'm just so passionate, interested, and exciting about. So I think the fact that we're seeing the kids' journey start to reflect that, I think is exciting in a lot of ways.
So thank you.
Thank you.
For this information. I think it is a lot of information, and I appreciate you compiling it. I think oftentimes it allows us to be curious. The question always for the Board of Education is, how does this information inform what we do and what we're responsible for? So I think that's always where we need to bring ourselves back. Although I think I have 1,000 personal questions that I want answers
I'm always
to.
here.
And if you can, tell my 3 kids what they're going to do. But I think
if
that
I could only get mine to listen.
It's useful for us as we see this to then ask how does that inform how we work as a board and or what we provide to the district. And I think that's kind of the different questions where they're emanating from. But thank you for the work. What I will say is, because we did not have a meeting in June, that the Darien Board of Education Chairman's Book Award went to Kai Zhao. I said it wrong. Someone say it right for me. Kai's last name.
I think it's Joe.
Thank you. I said it
I think
close.
it's
okay.
I think it's Joe.
So congratulations to Kai, and the Darien Board of Education Award went to Angelica Yika Nakarin, and so it was great to participate that evening, and we honor them. But thank you for getting our kids through and getting them through their senior
My pleasure.
year.
Thank you for all your support. Thank you.
We will move on to the discussion and possible action on the proposed Middlesex Boston field trip. Dr. Landon and Mrs. Summers.
As you recall, Shelley Somers was here a couple of months ago to discuss the potential for a Boston field trip. There are a lot of concerns they had. I believe she's addressed those all. We jointly believe that we listen to the community and the board, that if we're going to discontinue the Boston field trip as we know it, we should at least allow those youngsters who are currently going into the 8th grade to have the opportunity to enjoy the trip. So Shelley has a proposal for that trip, and which I think meets many of the concerns the board had, and has a decent thought about where to go for the following years.
Thank you, Dr. Landon. First, I just want to say that I really reflected a lot on the feedback that you gave me, and I tend to perseverate over things, and I really felt that I hadn't prepared the community the school community, the community at large, as well as this body, for such a big change. And I know it came across as very negative, so I revisited my thinking, and I just feel that because of the reversed way in which these presentations were made, that decision from the board, it would have been a difficult one because you didn't have the information. I didn't provide it for you in the right order. So I was looking at the Boston trip and about the feedback about hotel rooms and anxiety. I know I gave you an itinerary, which is just the suggested itinerary, but some changes that that I would like to see. I would like to do hotels by team. When I talked to the chaperones, again, the feedback was that when you get students who don't know you from different teams, that's what causes often that lack of respect and compliance or following any directions whatsoever. So the teachers felt that given their own students with whom they'd already built a rapport, it would be a better thing. Also, to have hotel rooms by team would be a much better thing, to have the teachers have some input about that so it didn't become a popularity contest, thus leaving out some students. So we have some options in that. I did present you with the 2-day option, but I just sent you what the tour, let me tell you that I've explored every possible trip in the world to see what would be the best fit. So I think that having another year of Boston, and then I had a conversation about something called Outward Bound New York City. They were filled up this year. It is the coolest trip that would fit right into our future capstone project where students explore the boroughs. They have different opportunities for service learning. They stay in different places. They have a lot of time for reflection, but unfortunately they're regrouping and weren't taking any new groups. There is that same type of trip in Philadelphia. Philadelphia just doesn't do it for me. So we ended up looking at Boston. Now, I also looked at the cohort. This is a cohort that needs social and emotional work together, team building work with their teachers in order to be successful in 8th grade and beyond. So taking that into consideration, the itinerary includes a lot of opportunities for fun things, and some of the fun things for example, the DJ dance. I would not have the DJ dance. That's a very awkward situation at this age. I would have the dinner piece of it together and then break into small groups for different kinds of team building and debriefing. I would include a debriefing every single night with some team building before kids were sent to their room. We've built in longer times at Quincy Market. We've made it both a science and social studies trip. We kept the 2-day thing, although I did explore a 1-day opportunity, but again, it's just so squished when you're doing a 1-night stay. So the 2-night includes a whale watch with an alternative for those students who are not water people. So it's science and social studies. We're still putting in, based on student feedback, we're keeping Salem. That was the most popular thing. We're doing a little time at the mall, but again, making it tied into the curriculum, but not as tightly and not forcing that issue, but really focusing on work with small groups. Again, given the cohort, I think that it would behoove us to do that work together at the beginning of the year so that we could see the impact of those opportunities throughout the year. The social studies curriculum attachment connection that we had, I am proposing that we can perhaps still explore colonial days at our campus. So it takes a little bit of it does take a little bit of that curriculum away. It does add more fun and more social interaction between students. However, it's a controlled thing. It's not, all right, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And some of those proposed things on the itinerary, there would be alternatives to. And especially the evening at the hotel, I do plan on working with my staff to change that a little bit. We've gone with DJs, and it gets out of hand, quite honestly. They're too young. They don't dance. They run around. So I would change that evening and keep the other activities as they are. I think there's a lot of interesting opportunities for our kids.
Any board comments or questions? Mrs. Stein.
So
this is the current 7th grade, well now they're almost 8th grade class, so will you be communicating to the parents and students in the current 6th grade and perhaps even incoming from 5th to 6th?
Absolutely.
That this is changing?
So it would change. The New York City trip is still an overnight trip. It just takes us in a different direction. It takes a
perception that everyone talks about the
Boston trip. So you're right, if I could start building that, it's a New York trip, yeah, absolutely. And in fact, include that when we do that orientation for parents type of thing.
Any other board comments or questions? Mr. Maroney?
Just a logistical question. Are you concerned at all on pricing of the rooms, that the hotels will not be able to accommodate people? The difference between a quad room and a single room, let's just do double room and quad room is less than $100. And so I would assume there would be a lot of parents that will say, I want my child to have their own bed.
I don't send them that. We make that decision
Ah,
in-house.
okay.
So
Sorry,
that was
that.
a huge consideration of mine, quite honestly. And I think because of just different types of social anxiety, gender issues, et cetera, that the double room would solve so many of those problems and so many of the phone calls about boys sleeping with boys and 4 boys in a room. I just have to, it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. It's like $600, I think, 6 something for the double.
Yeah.
I know 600 and something sounds a lot more than 500 and something, I think, when you're proposing a school trip, but it would alleviate, and I've been back and forth on this, with the tour guide, and we've worked with this company for years, and my next call was sweeten the deal a little. You know, bring down that double price and we can work with you.
So do we find that kids have a choice in that? I mean, is there any sort of like general
That's
sense?
not.
I mean, I feel like kids would be like, I want a quad. I want as many
Yeah.
friends in a room as I can.
True, that's where the fun is.
So I guess what I'm saying, I don't know the right answer, but
Yeah.
but I actually
don't-
leave it in your capable hands rather than
Thank you.
the parents deciding.
No, I wouldn't make that apparent. I can't. It's either one or the other for the
Okay.
tour company. Yeah, I guess having just your buddy, one friend there is kind of boring. You just go to sleep.
I mean, I don't know. I'm just saying, if what you're saying is
Yeah.
you guys will make that determination,
Yes.
then okay.
Yes, I would think we would go with the 4, but it also changes things because kids don't find out what team they're, like it's not blown out of proportion, the hotel room thing, because it's on your team. Nobody knows that information yet, and that does come out at the beginning of school, but it's still, okay, we have to work with this team. We have to see what we're talking about. So it's not a done deal. You might not have your best friends on your team, and people won't be left out as much. I don't know. The teachers felt strongly about having it that way.
Mrs. McKenna.
I just wanted to say thank you for listening to what the board had to say, the community, and for your thoughtfulness. You know, you've looked at field trips very carefully before, and I appreciate that you've done that again. And it's a lot to take in, whether it's these 9 opinions or the thousands out in our community. So thank you for reconciling all of that.
Sure.
So any other comments or questions? So with that, may I have a motion to approve the proposed Middlesex Boston field trip? Mrs. McCammon, Mr. Burke seconds. Any other discussion? All in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and I really appreciate your support and your patience with this long and winding road of the school trip.
We got there. Okay, we can hear the next one. We'll move on to the report on the DAEG Barbara Harrington Fund Awards. Dr. De Silva.
Good evening. We continue to be fortunate each year with the group that here in Darien we call the Darien Advocates for the Education of Gifted Children. And while that is the group, they are supportive of all students and all of our teachers and continue to support professional learning that happens across the summer. And I can see some of our reps maybe in the 3rd or 4th row if you just want to raise your hand there. In addition to financially supporting our teachers, the amount of time that this group does really dedicate to being thoughtful about these grants, organizing these grants. This past year, they helped facilitate a different way in which our teachers can, or evidenced their learning from the summer, where they started off the year at our professional learning days with, during the opening breakfast time, with a brief presentation that they could share with all of the collective staff. So most of you know that at Tokenique Elementary School, for example, our teachers all stepped foot there on August 27th, and during breakfast, the teachers that received grants across all of our elementary schools were there sharing out their learning. Similar experience at Middlesex and Darien High School. Again, they were up early, organizing, preparing, helping our teachers ensure that they had all their materials ready. So what you'll see is our 24 of our teachers have been awarded grants this summer, totaling over $11,000. They're various or varied in many different ways. We have art teachers, we have math teachers, social studies teachers, world language teachers. What's nice about the grants this year is they are across all of our schools, all of our elementary and middle and high school. So we have representation from all of them, including our gifted program. And so you can see that the experience that they have is very diverse, and it is not at all limited to our gifted teachers. So thank you again to the Darien Advocates for Gifted Education and all those parents that contribute to that program as well.
Any board comments or questions? Seeing none, I will just echo thank you very much to the DAG and everyone who supports it. It is an amazing, wonderful opportunity that the community provides to our teachers and the district benefits from. So thank you very much. We will move on to an update on the district enrollment. Dr. De Silva.
So we continue to look at enrollment closely alongside of our principals, in particular at the elementary level where we may have breaks. What you do have in your packet is the K-12 enrollment. You'll notice the kindergarten numbers. I've also included at the bottom of your sheet the enrollment from last year in kindergarten to this year, just so that you can see the differences or not. We have not made any decisions about breaking sections yet. We continue to meet with our principals. We'll actually do that this Thursday. We look at the numbers closely. We also look at the number of students who are pre-registered, not completely registered in the system. Thanks to the hard work of Ms. Sion this year, we are now online registration. So our parents have begun the process perhaps, but haven't completed it. Those children may not actually be included in these numbers yet. So we include the official completion of the registration packet in particular in kindergarten, but that could actually happen in any grade.
Great. Mr. Burke.
I'm just looking at these numbers, and I could quite easily be confused. But when I look at the high school numbers, 9, 10, 11, 12, these are the projected numbers for next fall, correct?
That's correct.
So I thought that the current 9th grade or rising 10th grade class, at the beginning of the year, I thought their enrollment number was significantly maybe 30 or 40 kids higher than the 10th grade class, but now it's, as our 10th graders become 11th graders, their class size is going to be 50 greater than the class behind them, where I felt like it was flipped this year, that we enrolled a big freshman class.
Do you think maybe they're just reversed?
Right. So is it possible, are those just reversed by, which is fine,
I'm wondering if they're just that they're the actual 381?
I think the numbers are accurate.
Okay.
I can certainly double check them, but I would believe that they're accurate. They're double checked by Linda Pirro, just in case I get wiggly eyes, but I will most certainly verify them.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Any other board comments or questions?
Just on something like this, could you just put a total for the total population on something like that?
Oh, yes, of course.
Anyone else? Board comments, questions? Nope, that's good. All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Bless you.
We will move on to the discussion and possible acceptance of contemplated gifts for the Darien Youth Lacrosse.
Thank you, Mrs. Ockman. So this is an annual donation that you'll see in front of you here, $5,000 each to the boys and girls lacrosse programs at Darien High School. This will help offset the cost of the filming expenses for both those programs. The filming expenses for each of those teams run close to $10,000, $8,000 to $9,000 or so. So this generous donation from DYLAX will help offset part of that cost.
Any comments, Mrs. Ritchie?
Could you just remind us, since there's not a whole lot of detail on the forms, just remind us specifically what they're filming so everybody knows?
Yeah, they're filming, so they film varsity and sub-varsity games. That cost also includes the film breakdown of those games, the shared film for players for both in-game strategy as well as recruitment purposes. For them to.
I'm sorry, go ahead. No, just that column on the left where it says GIF intended for, check appropriate responses. Do we need to check Darien High School or?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right now it doesn't have an intended.
Yeah, so all this filming happens at the high school, correct?
Correct. Well, either the high school or the opponents.
But it's for high school
yeah.
teams.
Yes, it's for the Darien High School boys and girls
I
lacrosse
think it's in
program.
the description, both the girls across the DHS and the boys, but yes, we can check that.
I just want the form to be complete. I don't think it is at this point.
Mr. Burke?
Certainly, thank you to the organization for that help. And that might be an appropriate time to also just say congratulations to the boys and girls team. I mean, all the spring teams, but
Right.
since this is about a lacrosse, Griff, on their, great success in winning states this last week. So congratulations to them, and thank you for the gift.
Any other questions on lacrosse? Okay, with that, can I have a motion to approve the contemplated gift from Darien Youth Lacrosse? Mr. Burke and Mrs. McNamara, all in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you very much to DYLAX and those that chose to contribute. We'll move on to the discussion and possible action on the proposed athletic department field trips. Dr. Landon and Mr. Manfredonia.
So you have here, again, a series of field trip requests for the 2019-2020 school year. Many of these are trips with the anticipation of our students, athletes qualifying for some of the New England meets. They don't always, but if they do, we want to be prepared to allow them to have the opportunity to stay overnight to compete in some of the far-reaching New England states where some of these are held. This also includes 2 trips for the hockey team this year, one for a preseason scrimmage, one for an in-season game that will require overnight trips. You also see here the squash trip, which you have seen in the past for their national tournament. The site has not yet been selected. They've alternated between Hartford area, Philadelphia in the past, so we don't know where that location is just yet. We anticipate that being, though, an overnight trip. I don't know if you want to handle these, Mrs. Ockman, as an individual or.
Well, why don't we open it up to questions, and then we can see if how we can do that motion. Are there any comments or questions? Mr. Maroney.
Yeah, for me, one way to avoid doing this as individuals is if we could add one more column and just say these have been done year on year versus new. So if there's a new trip that we haven't approved in previous years, it would be great to flag that. But the way I go through this, all of these we approved in the past number of years. They're the same exact trips, maybe different locations, but they're the same trips.
So these are all similar trips we've seen in the past. We have added a second hockey trip. You're used to seeing the one hockey trip in the preseason. This year, we were able to schedule a game out of state in season, which would require the overnight trip.
But you know what, that would be great in the future if we could add that column, because I do think as we bring on new board members, they'd be aware whether this is an established trip or something. So that'd be helpful. Mrs. McNamara.
I had submitted some questions. Were you able to address those?
I didn't have the opportunity to see those.
Dr. Landon, I sent those to you this weekend.
I got the questions on guidance.
That's okay. Then we'll just start from scratch.
That's right.
I'm sorry, I
No,
just don't
that's-
recall any special question. Do you?
No.
You know what, they came one right after each other, so it may have looked duplicative.
Okay, we'll just move on.
Well, we can
No.
answer them, I'm
Exactly.
sure.
I'll just, so I'm sorry that you didn't have this
Okay.
information previously, but in looking at all the trips, and granted some are previous and the one new for the hockey team, as I went through all of these, I realized I was trying to understand, again, the practice, I don't want to say, or policy, but not to confuse with board policy, which is stated and has a numeric allocation, but the policy of the practice of the district and how you handle these trips. Because from what I was seeing, and correct me where I'm looking at it wrong, where we were paying for hotels, we're not paying for hotels, we're paying for the tournament fee, we're not paying for the tournament fee. Could you explain to the board and the public what is our practice? Because it looked inconsistent to me, so could you help me?
Yeah.
Transportation, the tournament fee, hotels,
Yeah, I mean,
meals,
typically,
et cetera.
typically, the district would handle the tournament fee, the entrance fees,
Okay.
for these tournaments. The hotels would be at the cost of the parents, and as is the transportation for these events,
Okay.
as would the meals.
Okay. But we didn't see this here.
Mrs. McNamara, do you want to point a
I'm
specific
going
one
to
out?
defer to my colleague to the
Well,
right.
I can be specific.
Okay.
And these, I look at all these as important trips, and I'm sure
Yeah,
they are. But I think
yes.
what Krista, Ms. McNamara is saying is there's not consistency. For instance, the state wrestling tournament, we're going to be asked to cover the rooms. So I didn't see that on any other of the requests. And it just seemed odd to me because the number of rooms is estimated to be 7 to 10, and I don't recall how many specific members there are on the wrestling team, but I don't remember it being that large. So, but I think we should be consistent, and as you stated, I think it's a good policy to cover the fees and cover some portion of the transportation costs. But then beyond that, I do think we're starting to see inconsistencies here. So I would encourage the administration to be consistent, because I think it should be applied consistently among all the sports, what we're covering. And it kind of jumped out at me that for the wrestling tournament, we are covering hotel rooms, and 7 to 10 hotel rooms seems like a lot of hotel rooms.
And may I add that on the other side of the hockey tournament, we're covering nothing. So we keep coming back to this topic, but again, it is your decision, and if you need more guidance from the board, let us know, but if not, I personally seek to you to put together some policy or practice that you believe in and you can apply to all your teams, because of course, I think these are all great trips.
Right.
I by no means but I struggle with inconsistency, once again, of a tournament fee or the bus or the overnight, that we're not on the same page on these teams. It is,
So, Mr.
worst case,
Manfredoni,
it's
is there a reason?
discrimination and the
Is
best
there a
case,
reason for the difference at this moment?
I can't say there's a reason right now.
I just wanted to say, I'm sorry I didn't get those questions. I don't remember getting them. But we will we'll fully address that for the meeting of the 25th.
Okay.
We'll show you exactly what we do, how we do it, when we do it, why we do it, and we'll have a policy that goes with it that will be consistent for the future.
Okay, so do any of these need to be approved this evening?
They
or
do
would
not. No, these are all for the 1920s, so they can certainly hold off to the 25th, absolutely.
So why don't we wait till next meeting to approve then and address some of these concerns? And that will give the administration some extra time to take a look at it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank
I
you.
would add the use of hotel security to your list of things you're looking at, because it looks like we are using it in some cases and not others, and paying for it in some cases and not others. And I think the question of security is
And if that's hotel dependent,
not
and
just
hotel policy.
some hotels
Require
Well, the only question I would add is, I didn't see girls hockey, that maybe they didn't request. I don't know if that's not varsity or what the explanation is, but
No request.
Oh, and just the other thing I wanted to bring up, it just jumped out at me again with the Penn relays. They're requesting money for the boys' trip, but not requesting any money for the girls' trip. So, I also want to be careful because then we start to get into, is there a Title
Yeah, again, there was
IX?
no request there. So.
Right, so I just think we have to be consistent too. Like, one group, the girls are not asking for money, but the boys are. So why is there a difference in those two groups?
Yeah. It's inconsistent, but the girls have asked for some additional trips that the boys haven't asked for, so.
We'll have a policy.
Okay, well, maybe then just to put it, and then may I also ask, we're looking at this unique set of trips, but I think we can also look at it when any of our teams are also using transportation to go to other, seeking out other high competition outside of FCAC or outside of SEAC, which we do see.
Yes.
And how does that play in? And can we apply that same, whatever you come up with to those trips?
Right,
They may
because there are
not
some
be
of
on
those
this
trips are
list.
not overnights, right? So
Correct,
they're
but
they're
still
same day, right?
requiring
Sure.
transportation and all. So,
Yep.
again, I don't want to limit whatever analysis you're doing to this unique list, but let's, if we can broaden it a little bit.
Sure.
Thank you.
Great. So we will see you next meeting.
Yes, thank you.
2 weeks.
We will move on to further discussion and possible action on the Darien Athletic Foundation contemplated gift of the Darien High School cross-country running track. Dr. Landon and Mrs. Montanaro. Do you want to give an update?
I can certainly introduce it. Oh, Jennifer's here. I'm sorry.
Hi, good evening, Jennifer Montanaro, Maywood Road. Apologize, didn't think I was going to be speaking, but
Here we
is
are.
there anything you'd like me to say?
So why don't we do this? Last night, the RTM voted
okay.
to approve. Part of our original motion was that we would consider, after all governmental approvals were had, we are at that point. So it is now at the Board of Ed with our stipulations that we had put in the motion. It is now before us to make a decision. I do think that we asked you if there was any follow-up with neighbors, so if you've had any, that would be useful to give to us before we make a decision. And then, Mrs. Montero, if you have anything to add, although I don't know if there's any new information, but feel free.
Okay.
There was a neighbor who was concerned about encroachment on the track on that person's property. So Mike Lynch and I and Jimmy Samata, who's the maintenance person, met at the request of Mrs. Ockman because this gentleman made the request through Mrs. Ockman. Apparently, the original design had the track encroaching.
Oh my.
But that was modified and changed before the final design went into place. And we looked at that and saw that the track actually runs on the high school property and not on this person's property, and there is an eight-foot setback. And we know that when the crushed path goes in, they will be staked to ensure that no part of that path goes anywhere near any property other than the high school property. So I think we've resolved that issue. Certainly you guys did when you went in with it, and then when Jeremy Ginsburg and company looked at it, they modified it to address that issue. So I think we're in good shape.
Okay. Any other board comments or questions? Mrs. McNamara.
What is the annual maintenance of this, do we think?
We think it's going to be anywhere between $3,000 and $4,000 collectively between both the dealer property and the high school property.
Okay, and then that's amenable to the administration and your budgets
Yeah,
going
we
forward?
looked at it. We actually think that our expense is going to be less
Okay.
because it's only the crushed stone.
Okay.
With the Dilla property, they have the walkway that has to be maintained, plus the
right.
crushed stone, plus the protection of the wetlands. We don't have any of that.
Okay, great, I just want to make sure.
Are there any other comments or questions on this? Okay, after much conversation, may I entertain a motion to approve the contemplated gift by the Darien Athletic Foundation of the Darien High School cross-country running track with the stipulations as noted in the Board of Education motion from January. Sorry, I'll give it to you longer. Mr. Burke so moves. Mrs. Ritchie approves. All in favor?
I seconded it. Now.
I'm sorry, second. All in favor. Congratulations. Thank you very much. I know it's been a labor of love.
We will move on to discussion of the 2018-2019 financial report and possible action on the budget, proposed budget transfers. Mr. Feeney.
Okay. We had our meeting on May 22nd, as Ms. Ritchie had mentioned. This budget report is a higher report that breaks down the salaries, the operating expenses, the fixed costs, as well as the revenues. The financial report coming into the month of June shows a favorable balance of $143,802. Some of the highlights of the changes that we discussed in the meeting were some of those vacancies or leaves of absences that have occurred since our last meeting, the legal projection, the AC at Oxbridge, the LCD displays for grades 2 and 3, and some security camera upgrades, as well as drainage and some miscellaneous repairs. The salaries under the financial report have a positive variance of about $648,000, and it's important to note that 66% of this amount is attributed to 3 categories. One would be technology, with the vacancy that was in that for pretty much the full year. The second would be under RC16, which would be the administration for the superintendent, as well as RC24 with resignations, attritions, and some of the retirements that have occurred. Adjustments have been proposed under the budget transfer sections in order to reconcile various accounts. And also I wanted to highlight as feedback from the board as the prior authorization of budget control. Those is where our budget control numbers came out of 0.22 for DHS math, social studies, curriculum instructional support, a full 1, and 1 special education aid. The operating expenditures are currently in the negative variance, of which the majority are being accounted for under RC12, which is maintenance, as well as RC24, special education. And those 2 lines account for about 94% of the shortfall. It's important to note that although RC24 projects a negative variance of $753 under the operating expenses, when you factor in the excess costs, it brings it into the black. Our fixed costs are currently on or close to projections. Fixed costs include all of our health insurance, utilities, transportations, and workman's compensation. And our revenues are also in the black. Our excess cost reimbursement, as presented into the monthly financial report, have come in through the state of Connecticut, which is factored in here for the amount of $3.4 million, which represents a 73.5% reimbursement rate. With that being said, I can entertain any questions regarding the financial report. And the second item category are the budget transfers as well. So I can entertain
comments or questions
On the report.
on the report and the transfers. Mrs. McCannon.
Are we going to go over the transfers separately, Michael?
We could, yep.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
Okay. So the next part of the report is the budget transfers for June 2019. I can go down individually. There were some questions at the board, at the committee level, regarding some of the transfers. Tom Mooney did come out with an opinion regarding that as well, which I believe Ms. Ritchie had touched base upon. There was some concerns regarding the new furniture equipment for the picnic tables at the cafeteria at the high school that were purchased. When we reviewed it, that category would fall under property. And as long as property was in the black, the board, or at least the superintendent, had the ability to go ahead and make those transfers in order to purchase that item. As Ms. Ritchie had said it before, I previously were doing all of the transfers for the Board of Education for their approval, but what I could do and what is recommended as well is to basically, not all of these are transfers. Some of them would be adjustment that the superintendent could make. So I think as we go forward, we should break out which ones are the transfers under categories that fall under the policy, and then which ones are the intra-transfers that are going individual line items as well.
I do think that's a great idea because there is a distinction and it's important for the board to understand that. So I think moving ahead, I don't think we'll have you with us to do that, but I think it would be important for the next time we sit down and have this report that I would like to still see these account adjustments because I think it's important for the board to be informed and to discuss them in public, but they technically do not require our approval. So the picnic tables were purchased and we're seeing them on the transfer report, but technically their money was there, and the superintendent and administration had the authority to go ahead and make that purchase. It's different when it's a transfer between those broad categories as outlined pursuant to the state statute, and our policy is consistent with that statute. So I do think that as we move ahead, that is something that, so it's clear to everybody exactly what we're required to do under the law and under the policy, and then what is more for informative purposes for the board.
I think that the difficulty has been that you've been interchanging the language.
Right.
In that transfers clearly are between those broad categories. But the movement of funds within a single category or group category has always typically been, because boards give superintendents the right to move within single categories where there is funding. And that's because we can't come back to the board every day if things come up, some small, some larger, but we do have that discretion. Superintendents do have that discretion, generally speaking. However, when it comes to transfers, which are completely different, those require the board to approve those.
Right.
Generally speaking, that happens at the end of the year, actually.
So I think, and this is my favorite term, as most of you know, in an effort to be as transparent as possible, the board was looking at every single money movement, and I think the desire is still to see that. But the nomenclature was causing concerns that something was happening that is irregular, and both the professionals and the council has ruled that there's nothing improper going on.
That's
it is just a
correct.
matter of making sure we have the terminology right, so those kind of watching or not following it along as well don't get confused. So I like Mrs. Ritchie's idea of the idea that we still want to see everything. We still want to see the account adjustments, but we'll make sure very clear what is a true transfer, and that our votes will ensure that. So we thank you for letting us see everything. But we'll clean up our language around it.
Right.
Who knew transfers would be pejorative? But we'll clean up our language around it and have account adjustments. That's an accounting maneuver versus true transfers. Everyone okay with that, Mr. Burke?
Right, and I think you summarized our council's opinion very well, and when you look at the actual, statute, it's really, it's self-evident, and because the idea of a budget, and when you look at the law anticipates, the state law anticipates that, budgets aren't concrete documents, and indeed, you return money to the town because there's money left, or there are other years, there was one year that the board had to go and ask for more money, and the law anticipates that. And in order to minimize those events, the state law gives this board and then its designee, the superintendent, the ability to move monies around that are necessary. And the broader the category, then you need board input, as opposed to one subcategory where you're moving for one item and you have enough money in that general account. So I think we do have to change that term, but to be clear, what's been happening is that we have been looking at and improving in public every single transfer, and the reality is that the superintendent has had more discretion than that.
Any other comments on transfers or Mrs. Ritchie?
So I had brought this up at the budget committee, and I think it's for Susie, at the Math and Focus, the textbooks. I see that coming in. Is that something that we had in the 19-20 budget and now we're accelerating, or I'm just wondering if we're shifting something that is in the next fiscal year. Are we taking care of that now?
We're taking care of that now, as opposed to this. The plan is still going to continue. Grades 3 and 4 will be implemented for next year, and grade 5 the following year. We just implemented K2. And so if we can get those textbooks in our teachers' hands before they leave for the summer,
Okay.
we'd like to be able to do that.
Okay. But is it an expense that's now shifted to this fiscal year from next fiscal year. So are we going to see a reduction, a corresponding reduction?
You'll see some reduction, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. McNamara.
I just wanted to go back to, do we require anything from a policy standpoint, a Board of Ed policy standpoint, as far as how we're doing or how we're phrasing this, or are we all good? I just wanted to make sure we're all clear on that.
The policy reflects the state law. It's almost verbatim in terms of the broad categories that, that dictate when you have to have a transfer approved as opposed to what's in the discretion. So it really mirrors, our policy really mirrors the state law. I think it's a question of practice where we've been calling these transfers and discussing them, but the reality is that they're not transfers. They're
Right,
more
budget
adjustments, and that's reflected, in our policy. I mean, we could.
It's
I mean,
more
we
of a
could find a way to
process.
call it.
I think it's more of, that was our practice, that's been our process, and it's not dictated by policy, so I don't know, I'll leave that to the policy experts if we want to formalize that, but I do think our practice, our process should be changed to better reflect what the state statute dictates. So I think we should move away from calling things transfers when they're really just account adjustments.
So does policy need to reflect that? I mean,
The
even if it's just
policy
semantics.
is intact. The policy is what state statute is. Really, what we would need to change is how we are using our language. It doesn't
Okay,
require
I just-
policy change to do that. Our policy is intact and whole and mirrors state statute.
You do have the opportunity, if you wanted, to add in a stipulation about a threshold for a transfer in the case of an emergency. I don't know that it's necessary, but we have the 5%. There's something in there, but I have seen greater specificity. I don't know that there's an appetite for that.
I don't know that, I think, well, I guess the board can opine whether they want to do that. I would say currently our policy mirrors state statute, so we're in good standing. That would be a discretionary item for the board to discuss. I haven't seen a need for it, if anyone else does.
Right, just so the public knows, so there's different provision or sentence in that statute that talks about emergency action by a superintendent. When you read it, it makes perfect sense, because if there's something that's emergent and the board can't meet, but something has to be done, that gives the superintendent power to do that, but he has to, or she has to, report immediately back to the board, and then we have to codify that. I mean, in terms of, it's hard to say that the number isn't the right threshold number when we haven't had to do it, and if you look at our overall budget number of $100 million, if it's a 4% threshold, I mean, that's a pretty big number. I mean, but certainly we could look at that, see if it needs to be increased, but the policy is sound because it gives the administration the ability to react to help the schools and the students if necessary, and not having to wait. If there was an emergency, if there was a summer, if we didn't have a scheduled meeting, if there was an ability to get a quorum together, it's that kind of situation that the statute contemplates, and I think it's currently met. But we can look at the number if you wanted to maybe change it. But.
Well, I guess I'd have to hear that anyone has a concern that we would need to look at the number.
I think it's adequate.
We haven't seen reason rise.
No, but for example, let's say you have a central air-conditioned building, and the main condenser, whatever it is, the main unit burns out, and it costs us $200,000 to replace it. The kids are in school. We know it has to be done. The school chief financial officer comes to the superintendent and says, we have to spend $200,000 and do this. And I would say, go ahead and do it, and I will contact, since we don't have it in our property account, we're going to have to take from someplace else to transfer. I am going to write a memo to the board and tell them we are making this transfer because we have an emergency. When we come into public session the next time, the board will have to approve the transfer. Or if the board wanted to, we could have an emergency meeting in order for the board to approve the transfer. But those are transfers, and those are big items, and that's what we would have to do.
Mrs. Ritchie.
So I just, back to the report, I just thought since it was brought up actually after our meeting, and maybe we can talk about it, the unexpected electrical maintenance at Oxridge. It sounds to me like it was determined that, and I don't know if Mike Lynch would be a better person to talk about this, but if, Mike, you could opine on the
Jill,
issues.
I think it was your question, right? So what was the concern?
So the question was whether or not this was, it looks very similar to the electrical panel upgrades, which I had understood to be a part of the original plan. So just was confirming whether or not this is additional expense on those electrical panel upgrades, or is this additional electrical panel upgrades? Is it something else altogether?
Go ahead. It's, the original, when we went before the Board of Finance, it was only for 3 schools, and Oxridge was not included in that. So this is for the air conditioning for Oxridge.
Okay.
We then, now remember, in the beginning of the summer, we had no idea what kinds of expenses we might have during the year. We knew what our budget was like. And so therefore, we put together a proposal to go to the Board of Finance and the RTM for funding to enable that to take place, because it was an expenditure that we couldn't easily predict whether we could handle it ourselves. Once the year started and we saw what the situation was, and there was no equity, I mean, this was an issue of equity. We originally thought that Oxridge was going to be built in a timely fashion. Now, by any standard, it is timely, but it's less timely than what we thought it was going to be. Now we have the kids for 3 years without air conditioning when all the other kids in the district have air conditioning. I had to make a decision, and we had the money. Now we had the money. We knew where we were. And within the property line, I said to Mike, you know, we have to provide the air conditioning because it's a matter of equity, and it is really, in the broader sense, health and safety of kids.
But to be clear, nothing's happened yet.
Right.
Nothing, the board has to vote tonight.
This
That's
is
a
one of
real
these things that
transfer.
fall under the transfers that we do need to approve.
Correct.
Yeah.
So money has not been spent. We have not gone forward with that project. It's for you to decide tonight whether or not you want to move forward with that project, and then we will start spending money for the electrical and the air conditioning and everything else that entails.
So so I'm clear on what has happened. The project for Oxridge, the new construction, is going to take longer than anticipated. As we worked through the process with the building committee, this came to light. And clearly IEPs and things like that drive air conditionings, but also we want to create a safe, healthy environment for our children. And in order to do that, we need to upgrade the electrical panels now, because we could be faced, we're lucky right now that we have very mild temperatures, but when the kids come back in August, they might be met with very hot temperatures, and we might be faced with the same issues that we had this past fall. So it sounds to me like it's something that shouldn't wait, and could it wait? Well, I guess it could, but I don't think that I would be inclined to do that.
Well, it sounds like we might have an equity issue if you wait.
My recommendation is don't wait. It's not really fair. If kids in all the other schools have air conditioning, how can we keep the Oxridge kids out?
But, Mrs. McNamara.
I appreciate the conversation of equity, but for years, we had an elementary school which had air conditioning and the other 4 didn't. So we have had that scenario. Is there any way in which this electrical panel and equipment can be reused? Do we have any thoughts of that?
The air conditioners could be reused, and the panel could be reused
Wonderful,
as well.
thank you.
The design of the panel, the electrical panel, what was in mind was to move that to the new
Okay, I think that's an
Oxridge
important
building and
point
save
for
an
people
expense
as we're
when we do
about
that.
to do construction. I think that's great.
The
Thank
one we
you.
approved in capital.
Those are conversations that we're having with the architect and construction manager.
Okay.
When they toured the school,
Okay.
we let them know kind of what we're doing in the school to keep it going.
Right.
And the electrical panel is one of those things that can be reused
Perfect.
as, along with the generator also.
Perfect.
So, and there's actually cafeteria, there's newer equipment in there.
Mhm.
So all that stuff will
Good.
be assessed when we get into the soft costs of furniture, fixtures, and stuff like that.
So we're not putting money into something that's going to be, right, so that's good. I think that's a good point just to bring up to the public.
Does that though depend on the phasing? Like if we are,
Good point, and,
Yeah.
and I think
That's
that's
true,
even
too.
more important. It's all just a concept right now, but if the school is phased, it's even more important that we have the electrical panel and we have the air conditioning set up for the students.
I also think we have a established practice of Mike Lynch rewiring rooms based on contractual obligations, right, through
Mhm.
IEPs,
Mhm.
and we've always taken that out of maintenance. So the way I'm looking at it is now what we've decided is a healthy and safe educational environment now includes air conditioning, and that's the difference to what this board and the administration has recommended before, and so the board is acting on that recommendation. So taking it from maintenance in order to do that has been the accepted practice when rewiring requires an educational environment to have certain attributes to it. And I think what the board is really saying, or what we said in the 3 other schools, and now what some of us, or we may have to decide tonight, or saying tonight, is we're doing things the same way we've always done them, and we're seeing it as a transfer, and no work has begun until we approve that transfer. Any other comments or questions, Mrs. McCammon?
so the other thing was we had asked the attorney about operating, and if we have the ability to move operating dollars to capital dollars, because our capital budget is handled a little differently. Did you mind
Sure,
reviewing
so
the attorney's?
Jill sent that question in, I sent it to Tom, I think I sent it back out to you because I hadn't heard from him. He did call right before our meeting. I had a chance to let Mrs. McCammon know. So capital budgets are different than operating budgets. Capital budgets, we work hand in hand with the town. There are agreed upon budgets. It's why they come forward the way they do, and so we do not have the ability to alter those budgets. Our operating budget is our operating budget, and so everyone on the Board of Education should be fully sure that we have the ability to expend within our operating budget as we see fit, and that is kind of what the Board of Education is empowered to do. And so that is where I guess I'd ask the question, maybe, do you have a concern exercising that authority? There is, or why would you think we could not? Or are you comfortable?
I just had read the legal book because I wanted to understand the question of transfers, and I wanted to make sure that that someone who does this for a living verified what I read in the book, and because I understand that it's handled differently and there's line item veto, I wanted
So
to
the
be clear where our
differentiation-
authority begins and ends.
Yeah, so the differentiation is on a capital budget, we are working with the town to develop that
Right.
plan, implement that plan, and the
Right.
9 of us cannot alter that plan without discussions with the town. On
Right.
operating, we are fully authorized to expend our expenditures as we see is in the best interest of the district. And so those are the conversations we have here.
Yeah.
And those are kind of the votes we have here. And I think your last question, to make sure I'm not missing anything, is what is the legal definition of capital? And Tom's issue was like, that is not really an issue. Your capital plan that you develop with the town is what you can't alter. What you cannot alter, or you work mutually to alter if you need to. We would work with the Board of Finance to do, and the RTM. But our operating, even if we choose to, if there's a hole in the roof and we decide to fix it out of operating, that is solely at the discretion of the 9 members of the Board of Education and the recommendations of the administration. Is that like a full answer? I'm sorry I couldn't get it all out to you. It was like 5:55 when you called. So. Any other comments or questions? Okay, so with that, can we approve the proposed budget transfers as brought forward by Mrs. Ritchie and Mr. Feeney?
Okay, I move it.
I'm going to go with Mrs. McNamara just because I put your name in that motion.
Yeah.
And Mr. Burke. All in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you very much. Mrs. Sion, do we have any personal action items this evening?
We do have one very sad resignation, as you mentioned, but we also, I wanted to highlight that we filled all 5 of the new psychologist positions at the elementary school. The change of position was somebody who had been filling in this year, has been on a long-term leave, and she proved herself to be of excellent quality, and so she will be one of the permanent positions.
Great, thank you.
Mrs. Ackman, if I may just answer Mr. Burke's question regarding the 10th and the 11th grade. So your eagle eye is better than ours. Those numbers are reverted. So we'll make that change.
It's not very eagle, but kids in one.
We'll give it
We're
to
been
you.
so focused on that 9th grade, that's why.
Yeah. He's got it.
I am going to entertain a motion to approve the the PAR report dated 6/11/2019. May I have a motion? Mr. Deneen, second? No. Mr. Maroney, raise your hand.
No.
Oh, you're not? Oh. Someone's got to approve it. Mrs. McNamara, all in favor?
Begrudgingly.
I want to.
All right.
Oh, wait, so
Any opposed? Mr. Maroney is opposed. I think he can still quit, just. But I appreciate it. I think he does as well. So that's an 8-1. I don't think anyone's abstaining. We all should have abstained. And any public comment this evening? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Maroney, thank you. And Mr. Burke.
Let's get back on the clock.
And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you. See you all next
Ellen,
time.
Ellen, I would ask, what's the weather prediction for graduation? I know you've got it handled.
Don't jinx it. Everybody take your robes out and hang them up.
You've got Al Roker on your side.
I did, I
hung mine.
my husband and I were chuckling.
I just hung mine today.
Why is he putting on?